On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. And I'm very excited today to hop into our interview. But before we do, I wanted to just also quickly mention that there's a lot of focus right now for the different live events that I've been providing around strategy, metrics, roles and responsibilities, all of those sort of things for companies in life sciences. And so if you're a company who is scaling, so you're growing in overall capacity and your organization is growing, my consulting agency focuses in on strategy, people, and process. And we currently have a free series that's going on that you can find at the link at the bottom of this current page. So thescalingmethod.com/thoughts at scale is where you would go to find more information about that. And so with that, let me hop right into the interview. Today on the Life Science Success Podcast, we have a very special guest with us, David Hibbard. He's the Vice President of Engineering at Sunrise Labs with over 25 years of experience in medical device development. And so I'm very excited to have David on and get to talk to him about what they're currently doing at Sunrise Labs and all the great things. So welcome, David.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so would you mind just taking a little bit of time to explain to everybody a little bit of the journey that you took to get to this point in your career where you're currently, developing a lot of different medical devices for companies?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been doing medical devices my whole career. So I originally got a biomedical engineering degree from Boston University. So I graduated in the early 90s. And really, one of the things that was sort of pivotal for me is that when I originally went to school, I started as a biology major and saw in the first semester that BU was one of the few accredited biomedical engineering programs in the US at the time. There's maybe only like 30 or 40. And immediately was like, oh, that's where I got to go, right? So I switched disciplines from, a straight up life science into biomedical engineering. And that, for me, was kind of a no-brainer and was a great switch for me. And I think it's worked out well for me in my career. But so as I mentioned, I've been working my whole career in medical devices. I've worked both on the services side for about half my career, and I've worked about half my career on a direct product delivery side. So I've worked for large companies, Medtronic. I spent about 10 years with Medtronic. Part of that was through acquisition, but I started with a smaller company there and was brought into the Medtronic family. And then also worked for a couple other device companies, one in stress echocardiography and one in proton therapy. And then from a services standpoint, I worked at DECA for about 8 years and then have been with Sunrise Labs for a little less than 8 years now.
It just seems like a pretty varied career. I always talk to people as well about this this statement that was made to me a little while ago. So it was probably like 6 or 8 months ago. Somebody called me a generalist. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm kind of offended by that term, but at the same time, I feel like I could play in a lot of different zones, right? So I mean, I feel like there are a lot of different areas around operations that I'm familiar with, and I feel like from an engineering standpoint, it feels like you've crossed a lot of different paths and industries as well.
Yeah. So, that is a term used a lot with the biomedical engineering degree in general. So, a lot of the original biomedical engineering degrees were sort of electrical based, some were more mechanical based, but, at BU, it was kind of a widespread program, right? So it was not real in depth in any particular discipline, but kind of really covered them all and tried to bring them back around in the latter part of the education to be more of like a medical instrumentation type degree. But, you had to have the foundations in mechanical, electrical, and everything else. So, yeah. So I'm not offended by that term.
Yeah, it took me a little bit by surprise. It was one of those things where I was just like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. In a lot of ways, I feel like It's always a lot of fun for me to be able to play in a lot of different areas as well. So, not necessarily offensive from that standpoint. I feel greatly benefited by the fact that I can, talk to folks in both pharmaceuticals as well as medical device. Which kind of leads me to my second question for you is that, you've led projects across, diverse medical fields, from everywhere from dialysis to radiation oncology. How do you have to change like the project or program management approach, to be able to match those specific areas?
Yeah, a lot. So a lot of it, I think, depends on the structure of the team, right? So when I was doing the peritoneal dialysis program, we had a very large team. We had, I think, maybe 30-ish engineers, and then another maybe 8 or so on the test side. So it really was a fairly large team over 6, 7, 8 years. And in that case, as a project manager, and that when I was back at DECA, that really did depend a lot on having strong leads in each discipline, right? So I needed to have a great software engineer lead, a great mechanical engineer lead, and a great electrical engineer lead. And I was really fortunate at that time to have that. One of the things that I really enjoyed about my time at DECA is that the engineers were phenomenal, right? They really understood their stuff. They really were willing to take risks and reach for, a high-end goal. So that, taught me some things as well about coming from a company like Medtronic into DECA. Medtronic tended to be a little bit more conservative. We want to know when this project's done. We want to know how much it's going to cost, that type of thing. And when I got into, DECA, every project was let's shoot for the moon. And, it was a little bit different mindset, and it took me a little bit of adjustment to get there. But, after I made that adjustment, it was fun and it was interesting. And, it was great to have a lot of resources to be able to make that transition, really make a device that is really a true game-changing next-gen device. Just a couple other things there. One is about structure of the team, having strong discipline leads. One that to me is really important is having a great relationship between the lead system engineer and the project manager. And I feel that those roles, while independent, work best when they really overlap to some extent. So, the system engineer is really looking out for some of the things that the project manager is looking for, and the project manager is looking out for some of the things that the system engineering is working for. So in my career, and, as I'm looking for PMs and hiring project managers, I'm looking for people with an engineering background so that they can really kind of, one, it's best if they've practiced engineering in some form or another, but two, they at least have a strong understanding so that they can really kind of, I don't know if it's really back up the system engineer, but really work well with the system engineer to kind of understand some of the technical trade-offs and, make sure that all parts of the project are getting done. And then again, same thing from the system engineer. It's like, hey, PM, you forgot about document X, right? So there's definitely a relationship there that needs to be built. A couple other things about, just sort of varying project management. One is certainly to understand regulatory strategy. How am I going to get this particular device to market? And that includes knowing, what the software level of concern is. Whether in the new terminology, I guess it's enhanced documentation or not. What it is in terms of 62304 is a Class A, B, or C software, and when you eventually do that regulatory filing, is it a PMA? Is it 510K? Is it Class 1, Class 2? Class 3, all of those things I think affect sort of the flow of the project. And, when you have to have design controls embedded in the system, right? So you can do a clinical trial and you really need to count on that data as part of your submission, in which case you need to have your design controls in maybe a little bit earlier, that type of thing. So and then I would say the last thing in terms of project management is, at Sunrise Labs, we're a services company, right? So we're partnering with outside entities that are trying to make some sort of project and make some sort of product at the end of the day. And part of what we're trying to do is be a good consultant to those companies, and we're also trying to make sure that we're maybe filling in where the company doesn't have core competence, right? So if a company comes in and they're trying to create, just an insulin pump or something like that, right? Their core technology may be around either storage of insulin or delivery or pumping technologies, but it may not be around a companion app, right? And they may never really want to be an app developer, right? So they're going to come to us, and we can give them advice or help on the instrument side, but maybe they are really looking for us just to do the app, and we can certainly do that too, because it's not. At the end of the day, it may not be where they want their core competency to be, right? You want to develop a company around what they really want that company to be. And it, again, some parts of the technology may be very core to them and some may not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to understand both the organization's limitations as well as, how do you become their best partner possible. Right. And, oftentimes, I've worked with vendors that, have a strict SOW, and that SOW, then leads to, some challenges in terms of that, but understanding, both the organization who's requesting the device as well as the organization who's building the device, Sunrise Labs in your case, it's just really, critical to outline those factors early on and then understand how that partnership's going to work in the end.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, maybe one more thing with just being there is to understand really what the MVP is, if you will, right? So what's the product that's going to get them out the door and get them start earning revenue and start really getting clinical use on their device. So, a lot of times customers may come in and they may be like, I want every functionality that I could possibly put into this device. And, one of the discussions that we want to have early on with them is, what's it going to take to really make a device that gets into the market and gets you some revenue and get you going without putting every single feature that you ever thought of. Think of your roadmap as opposed to everything in the first launch.
Yeah, and I mean that point of MVP and defining what are those critical elements of the device is most important as well. So tell me about the day in the life of your typical day at Sunrise Lab. What does that look like for you? And just curious to explore a little bit more about how many projects you're normally looking at and how do you manage kind of the workflow of all of that.
Yeah, so Sunrise is still a relatively small company, so we have. We bring in contractors when we need to, but we have anywhere between about 70 and 100 engineers, depending on the needs of the projects. And then we also have, obviously, operations and other staff as well. So for me personally, the software teams, the electrical team, the mechanical team, and the user-centered design team report into me. So obviously, my first focus is making sure that we have the staffing and tools that those teams need to be successful. And, we also, particularly in the last year or so, I've been really looking at a lot of process type improvements. I want to make sure that, we're following a good process that makes us as efficient as we can be as we look to, again, partner with a client to make a product. But, being a small company, my role is very varied, right? It's all over the place, right? There's some portion of it that's very interrupt driven, right? People are coming in just like, hey, is this okay? Is that okay? And it's kind of interesting. And one of the things I think I've learned over leadership is, a lot of people really do. They always want to do the right thing. They have really good ideas, and sometimes they're just looking for someone to say yes. And that. Someone coming to me and being like, I have this great idea that's going to save us a bunch of time, right? It's easy to say yes to that type of thing. And sometimes it's, just empowering people to say, hey, yes, go ahead and do that. We want to make that improvement. So there is definitely a portion of my role that's about staffing, a portion of my role, particularly partnering with the director of programs, or program management, to make sure that our projects are successful, right? And I'm looking more at the staffing side, process side, tool side, and the director of programs is looking more at the communication side. How do we keep the customer informed? How do we get the customer involved? Are we on track to deliver, what we set out to deliver?
Yeah, and I guess from that standpoint, since you brought up the product development process earlier on in your comment, so do you have to try and take your PRD process or whatever your product development process is, and try and interface that back with the clients? Or do you typically follow the client's milestones and just make sure that there are key things that are there in terms of the needs that they're going to have in terms of regulatory requirements?
Yeah, life would be so simple if there was one easy answer, right?
Right.
It's both, right? It's we have a process that's certified to 1345, so we've been certified for about 10 years now. Obviously, we do our compliance audits every couple of years. So we have a full-fledged quality system that can cover software development, full product development, mechanical, electrical, everything else. So we try to leverage that when we can, right? So some customers come in and they're a startup customer. They don't really have a quality system. They may not really even understand what the quality system is there for or what it's going to do for them. The other companies, we might get a partner of a Fortune 500 company, something like that, and they come in and they're usually looking to follow their own process. Although even in those cases, sometimes they come in and they're like, look, we got a lot of red tape. So what we want you to do is follow your process, give us the documentation at the end. We'll re-release it within the quality system of the larger company, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, it really does vary, and it's one of the things that we really need to work with the client on and the PMs on to make sure that the documentation package that we're coming out really does meet their needs. And the other thing that's really, I don't know if it's surprising or amazing or whatever, but they're just the level of documentation and the type of documentation varies so widely from company to company. We get one company come in that's like, we want you to develop this entire system with 2 requirements, and we're like, okay, maybe we need to define it a little bit more than that. And then you get, again, one of the bigger Fortune 500 companies come in and they're like, here's the 8,000 requirements that we want you to digest in the next 2 weeks. And so it's all over the board, but yeah.
And give us a discounted price, by the way. So.
Of course.
Just in case any of them are listening, I know that after working with a few of the larger companies myself, I'm familiar at least with outsourcing some of these things, and I feel like there are two distinct advantages. I feel like to coming to a company like Sunrise. One is the ability to innovate, right? So innovate. Leveraging people that may think truly outside of the box, because you're not in the same box that the larger organization is. But then 2, like as you mentioned just a second ago, some of the bureaucracy and the red tape just leads to slower sort of implementation as well. And so if you're wanting to accelerate things, I feel like or organizations like Sunrise allow you to do that readily as well. And so do you find a lot of clients that come that's one of the reasons why they've come to Sunrise?
Yeah. And let me throw in one other thing there too, which is, sometimes just getting input from a different, engineering organization is just to kind of follow up on what you're saying, right? It really allows different thinking, right? So I think when you get into a company, and maybe this is true when I was at Medtronic as well, you're like, well, this is the way we did product 1, and this is the way we did product 2, and now we're going to do the same thing in product 3, and it's all very incremental improvements. But when you step outside, maybe you can get some sort of different out of the box thinking. You can get thinking that's just hasn't occurred to the development team, right? Because they're just looking at the problem the same way over and over again. Then, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, I think I feel like it's innovation and speed are kind of the 2, 2 perspectives that I offer. But what I hear you saying is just a third could be just another set of eyes with a truly outside perspective, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
certainly. And so getting back to why do people come to Sunrise Labs? So I think there's lots of different reasons for it, right? Some may be that they just don't have the capacity internally to do a particular job. So we saw that a lot. I think late 21 and a lot of 22. There was just particularly on the software side, right? There's just a shortage of software engineers, and people really were looking to take aspects of a particular development and move it or get help, right? So, we could do either the full software development on a product like that, or, sometimes we're doing a portion of the software development, right? Like, again, maybe we're doing an app, or maybe we're doing a service interface, or maybe we're doing, the embedded work, while the other company is doing some other portion of the software. So there's certainly some of that, I think, is around capacity. And then, some of that is, I think, technical know-how. I think, companies going back to what is a company's core competency. I think, sometimes they're just looking out to say, okay, well, this is not our core competency. It's not a core competency we want as part of our business. So let's go find a company that has that type of skill set and make sure that we partner with them and get a good outcome by not spending our engineers down a path that is sort of a one-time only path, right? They want to take their engineering group and they want to make sure that their engineering group is always continuously improving and learning skills that relate directly to what their product is and what their core is.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. So can we pick apart a little bit of some of the examples of projects that you've been involved in, so that people that are, maybe considering, hey, look, maybe this is an opportunity for my company, maybe they'll more readily identify, those from the examples that you provide.
Yeah, so Sunrise Labs, we've really done projects kind of all over the board, which is great. It's what makes it fun and it makes it interesting. Again, some of the times when I've worked in like a direct product, like, okay, I really start to get in depth on the technology and the therapy, versus, when I'm working in the services side, it's more about, getting a good variety, being able to apply skills across a variety. But, to talk about some of the devices that we've worked on, we've definitely worked in the last 4 or 5 years or so, quite a bit on some different heart pump technologies. So we do tend to, work in the class 2 and class 3 type medical devices. And we haven't done a ton of class 1, but we've done some. We've done quite a bit in insulin delivery as well. So either that's on the app side or on pumping side, or the combination of them both. Done quite a bit on physiological monitoring. So we have, cardiac output monitors and, bedside monitors, those types of things. Image guided surgery. So we've done a couple projects on that. That's my background from back when I was at Medtronic. So those were certainly, getting those projects were, kind of near and dear to my heart. Some on prostate health, really prostate ablation. So it was robotic surgery for prostate. So also some IVD and over-the-counter type devices. So Sunrise has worked on, we had some flu, over-the-counter flu type diagnostic systems that ended up during COVID pivoting to COVID diagnostic systems. So that was certainly, an interesting time, right? So, one day you're in the office, the next day you're at home, and on Thursday we're working on a device that's over the counter for flu, and on Monday it is pivoting to a COVID device. So it is part of the role to be responsive and look what really are the customer's needs, and as they pivot, we pivot with them. So that's what's great about really having good communication, good back and forth with the client, so we're always on the same page with what their needs are.
Very good. In terms of the organization and, kind of the size of the organization at Sunrise Labs, how many people do you currently have?
So the whole team is maybe just under 100 right now. And of that group, there's about 70 to 80-ish engineers. We do, as times, flex that to a little bit bigger as we need to, as additional project staff is needed. So it really all depends on what the projects are at the moment. But that's spread across. We have a verification group. We have electrical, mechanical, software, user-centered design, and systems, as well as the project management group. So we really try to provide a full service offering, so we can really integrate electromechanical devices. I think is where we're probably best known for.
Very good. And then in terms of the company culture, are you seeing, the company culture at all shifts as the organization's grown, or what has your role been in terms of, maintaining culture in Sunrise Labs?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we have grown, right? So when I first came to Sunrise Labs, we were about 40 people. We've with sort of the flexible capacity, we've been as high as maybe 110, 120. So, so there is a big change, right? As you really get a bigger group like that, the communication gets harder. Gets harder to really have everyone follow a consistent process and do things the same way. And, one of the other things that gets a little bit more challenging is knowledge sharing. At Sunrise, we really try to, maintain higher integrity, right? We're always trying to make sure we understand what the customer's needs are, what the customer is looking for, as the market changes and the customer changes, then we're going to change right along with them. And we're going to have those discussions right with them. We really try to involve the customer in. So we try and bring the customer into our daily scrums and certainly have at the very minimum a weekly status meeting. We're going to go over status and work that's been done in the last week, how we're doing financially, how we're doing timeline. But the projects that work the best are the one where we really have the customer integrated, right? So they're in the daily scrums every day. There are times where we're working side by side with their engineer. So we may have, three engineers from their team and 5 engineers from our team all working on, a similar set of software. So that makes it really for good communication as well. And then the other thing that I really try and emphasize to the engineers is that we all have time to help and mentor each other, right? So no individual engineer has all of the knowledge. As new projects start up, there may be someone that has had experience in something similar, or maybe has a similar background with a similar tool set, that type of thing. So we always want to make sure that we have the subject matter experts or the reviewers that really have familiarity with that type of project and that type of tool. And then maybe the last thing would just be about, we do try and maintain a work-life balance, right? So, I know that's a little bit of a hotter button in the last 5 or 6 years in terms of companies as a whole. And, we do try and do that, right? So we want to make sure, to me, having someone whose, whole life ends up being about work, and they're, every day they're worried about, when they're going to get there and when they're going to leave, and is this done and that done. We want to maintain schedule. We want to make sure that we're meeting the client's needs, but we also want to make sure that engineers aren't getting burned out. So we do really try and maintain that work-life balance as well as we go through the project development process.
Yeah, really important all across the board, especially given, kind of the current times. I still continue to hear, organizations talking about quiet quitting. I still hear organizations talking about, just how do you, maintain this balance of letting people, some people work remotely and some people work, in person and things like that. It's a definite challenge that I feel like is more prevalent now, just given kind of what we just went through with COVID. But I also don't think there's going to be a quick shift back one direction or the other either. So yeah.
No, I don't think so either. We do try and empower our engineers to make decisions, right? And that's kind of what I was saying a little bit earlier. A lot of times people are just coming to me and saying, okay, this is really what I want to implement or do, and it's but it's their idea, and they're really are sort of embedded and excited about that particular idea. So we do try and empower the engineers to be able to do that. But yeah, we've struggled with the hybrid remote, right? We all went remote, and we did it was pretty harsh, right? It was like Thursday was discussion, and Friday it was, okay, you guys are out. Take your monitors and your computers and go home. And then, we didn't really come back for a good year and a half. So, maybe even longer than some other clients. And I think we worked pretty well. We pivoted and worked pretty well remotely. I think the hybrid is a little bit harder. Particularly when you're sitting in a meeting and you have 1 or 2 people at home and 4 or 5 people in a conference room. It's just hard to hear. It's hard to involve the people that are offsite. So we're struggling with that, and we're looking at different options. Investing in different just technologies in terms of video conferencing systems and things like that. To having we haven't really implemented core days yet, but having days where everyone's in the office type thing. But we haven't gone to that yet, so we're still feeling it out.
Yeah, there's quite a few clients of mine that are on the, hey, look, we're on this, everybody's going to be in the office X amount of days. During these days, if you need to have face-to-face meetings, is how you kind of arrange that. the one thing that I've talked a little bit about is just, in terms of your overall personal life still has to flex quite a bit, right? I mean, working from home is one thing, but then whenever you're having to still travel into the office and other things, it's just a little bit more that you have to do in life. And it's not like it's a problem. It's just something that you have to plan for as a part of your
Right.
day. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we did do during the pandemic was we went to a little bit more remote people as well, right? Not just remote working from home, but remote somewhere else in the country.
Sure.
And that's been successful for us too, right? So, with the, video conferencing tools and collaboration tools, we use Google a lot. We use, lots of other tools that are online, right? Almost everything we use is online now. It really does feel like someone's there. And, we have those people usually come in like once a quarter and, spend a week in the office. So they really get that face time and get the hallway conversations and, just a little bit more personal connection. But we've been successful with people being remote as well.
Very good. And then the last question I have for you, before we get into kind of the ones that I have that across all of my episodes, is more centered around leadership advice that you've received, given your background, both in larger companies like Medtronic and then now, smaller companies like Sunrise. It seems to me like there's a good opportunity to learn some lessons from you here on leadership as well, and something that you might have gained in terms of leadership advice.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I have seen lots of different leaders and lots of different styles over the course of my career. And, there are, you see the good and the bad, right? You kind of see it all. So, one thing, there's a few things that have really stuck with me. One is, someone said this to me really early on because I started managing people really on, but don't ask people to do something that you wouldn't do, right? So to me, this is like sort of a straight up ethics and having good ethics and making sure that everyone on the team has good ethics. That's just like a foundational guiding principle, right? It's non-negotiable. And this, for a company like Sunrise, I think this really extends into doing what's right. So, there are projects never go perfectly, right? I wish I could always say we started at point A in the concept, and then 3 months later we were shipping the product, and there was never an issue. But there's always things that come up, and we always want to make sure that we're communicating with the customer, understanding the risks, and making sure that we're making decisions together, right? And we're not, we're just being honest and open, and always trying to make sure that what the customer's needs are is really what we're trying to accomplish. And that's the best interest of what we can do, I think, for long-term partnerships with people. Is we want them to come back for more work. And, that I think to me is having, good integrity and good communication with them. And I would say a second one is really, in terms of leadership, I think when I was, a young fresh out engineer, I expected the leader to be like, well, you're going to do blank and you're going to do blank and you're going to do blank. Right. But it's much more about just making sure that the team has the opportunity, the skills and the resources to work together. Right. They are going to do the right thing. They may go off on a tangent because they thought that was the right thing. And that's where you got to step in and maybe say, okay, well, that's not really the end goal here. The end goal is a little bit more this way, and just kind of correct the team. But, they're the ones that are technically savvy. They know what's going on in the project. They know what's going on. They're intimate with the software and the hardware. So it's really just allowing them to be creative, to problem solve and make designs that, are elegant and meet the customer's needs.
Yeah, absolutely important. So David, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
So one of the things that really inspires me, I think, is just knowing that, working in the medical device industry, and that's what I've been doing my whole career, just knowing that the products that I work on are out there to make people's lives better. So I had, I've known people that have, had image guided surgery done on them for back, right? And, I'm like, yeah, that's a product that I work on. I feel proud that, that's something that I was able to contribute. And, there are certain devices that maybe intersect a person once, right? So again, the image guided surgery or, surgery is hopefully one of those, right? It's not something
Right.
you want to have over and over again. And there are other devices that I've worked on that are therapeutic, right? So there's something that needs to be used every day or a couple days a week. This kind of gets back to the peritoneal dialysis, right? Now, really, as thinking about the patient and the end user needs, looking at sort of the human factor side of things has been something that's always been a passion for me as well. So the peritoneal dialysis is something that takes I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes to set up before they go to bed. They're lying in bed with this box sitting next to them with a air pump in it, so it's making noise all night. It's moving fluids in and out. There's valves going off, right? So how does someone sleep with that, and how do they deal with that? And really going through some of like the formative studies and seeing users really trying to set the system up, it gave me a great appreciation for just how challenging it can be. Even for a trained clinician, some of the devices can be challenging, but particularly for someone in like a home use environment, it's really can be it's just eye opening, right? And there's a couple examples that I have of that. One is I was in a formative study for it's peritoneal dialysis, and we had a patient come in that was in a wheelchair, and there's lots of when you're on dialysis, there's lots of comorbidities that go along with it, right? And this particular patient was suffering from ailments in his feet, right? So he's in a wheelchair, and here we are with bags of dialysate, right? So he's got to be able to carry them, right? So he's putting them on his lap and wheeling across the room, and then we have a cassette that has 4 or 5 different tubes coming off of it, and he's running over the tubes with the wheelchair, and you're just like, oh my god, like.
Wow.
How is this really going to work and get set up? So, that was one that it really was kind of eye-opening to be like, okay, it really is a wide range of patients. And the other one that was kind of funny to me was kind of early on in my career, and it was me and another guy were both, in the 6-foot-ish range, right? And we had developed for image-guided surgery a new like cart-based camera system, and we were all proud of it, right? And we brought in the marketing person and kind of showed him how we could, tilt the camera and aim it and get it in over the patient. And this was like a 5'5" woman, and she looked me in the face and she goes, "Built by men for men." And I'm just like, oh boy. Some things to rethink here, so that that side of it has really kind of stuck with me. So making sure that we're taking care of the patient, designing good devices for the patient, and really just making people's lives better. That's really what kind of brings me into the office and inspires me.
Also important.
Yeah.
What concerns you?
Yeah, so my concern and my excitement are actually going to kind of be the same topic, and it's artificial intelligence. So it's artificial intelligence obviously has been around for a while, but there's lots of new tools that came out really in a lot of them in the beginning of this year, and from a development company standpoint, right? The question is, how do we use AI to make ourselves more efficient, right? So can we use AI to fill in code snippets? There's tools like Copilot and things like that we're investigating now to really, do some of maybe the repetitive coding tasks, right? So if you have like a case statement or an enum or something like that, right, and you want to fill in like 20 different cases, then let Copilot do that for you. It's probably actually bound to make less typing mistakes too.
Right.
So so there's those type of things, right? And how can we use AI to like improve the robustness of our code, right? So one of the things that we've been looking at lately is can we, if someone writes a function or a whole module, right, can AI kind of read that back and say, this is what I think this code is doing, and does it agree with like how we think it's supposed to work, right? So can it help find anomalies quicker? Can it help resolve them quicker? And can it help some of the engineers, dive into an area of expertise that maybe they don't have? So that's one side of it. And I think there's a lot of great uses for it, right? And it's kind of becoming more and more ubiquitous, right? Like even as you're typing a email, right?
Right.
It starts filling in the text for you, right? PS
Yeah.
best based on what you've done in the past. So then, when you look at, okay, what concerns you about it, it's really, it's AI has some concerns, right? Can it be used in a harmful way, either intentionally or unintentionally, right? Can you unintentionally violate intellectual property rights by, having some snippet of code written, or, where is that code coming from? Who wrote that? Is there copyright on it, right? That type of thing is a concern. Does the engineer really understand the output of maybe they got of some code snippet of AI in terms of its performance and what it's really doing? So that takes, you need to make sure you're doing good code reviews. You need to make sure you're doing good testing, but you can't test in quality, right? So you need to really understand, what that has done for you in terms of developing some snippet of code. So is the information you're getting back correct? You can type in questions into Chat GPT, and you get an answer back, and you're like, no, that's we know that's wrong, right? Yeah. So that's concerning, right? So if you're not a subject matter expert, how do you know if that's right or wrong, right? So you have to take whatever you get and do research on it, and then is it being used for more nefarious purposes, right? To make better viruses and things like that. And the other part of it that I think is sort of an interesting subject and is like in the educational system, right? So as internet first came online, right, it's like, okay, well, how do we educate people in a way that's useful for the future, right? And, when they first came out, it's like, oh my God, you can't look up anything on the internet, right? And then it was smartphones came out, and again, it's like, everyone has to take their smartphone and put it in the bin in the front of the classroom, right? And then it became more, how do we integrate that technology into the classroom in terms of when my son went through high school, they had Chromebooks and things like that, right? So I think AI is going to be the same way, right? It's you can take and get some sort of term paper or whatever written by AI. You still need to have the background and the understanding to know what was in there and be able to talk about it and defend it and believe what you've actually created, and to be know how to use those tools to sort of be more efficient in the future. And so it's kind of both, right? When I look at AI overall, I'm like, oof, this could be great, and oof, this could be very interesting.
Yeah, I just think, in addition to AI for the coding side, I just think of low code, no code tools, right? And at least for somebody like me, I did some coding in college, but it's been years and years, and occasionally there's something in the back of my head where I'm like, it would be nice to have a tool that could do this. And now the whole idea of doing it, is a lot less work than it used to be, at least for somebody like me. So that even I could do it. If you were to ask me though, at a lower level, do I know, where the greatest gaps are in the code, or are there risks with different aspects of it? I would have, really no overall idea. I would have to go to somebody else that has much more expertise and background in it. And I almost wonder, in that same light, right? Because my comment to my wife about ChatGPT and the things that I see is, I think gone are the days, or lesser in the future will be the days of sitting and worrying over every word in an email for 2 hours or half a day, whenever it's a lengthy email that you're having to construct for somebody and worried about their reaction or whatever. More or less because ChatGPT can do it, pretty quickly, and a lot of the results are okay. You can kind of sit there and read it and go, okay, so what do I think the reaction to this is going to be? A little bit more, versus spending all your time trying to construct the perfect sentences to get your idea across. And so I kind of wonder if there won't be in the future a point where we look back and go, we lost something because of this, kind of like we do with smartphones and technology today, where we say, look, this idea of personal connection is somewhat lost, right? We lose something by having so much electronic communication, but at the same time, it's much more efficient than calling everybody and talking to everybody individually. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right. It's kind of similar when you talk about the hybrid work. There's just a human connection that comes in when people are in the office, and you can, talk to them, joke with them, and that kind of stuff. And it also gives you, I think, a lot more sympathy to what someone else may be going through. Right. They're struggling to finish some code or finish some design, or and I think you're just more willing to jump over there and be like, hey, let me help you figure that out and get that done. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to the in-face and human connection, and hopefully we won't lose that as we go forth and new technologies come about all the time.
So I want to make sure, I think I heard you correctly, but I just want to make sure. So you were combining what concerns you and what excites you together, correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I didn't circle back around. There wasn't something else that you wanted to share with our audience before we conclude.
No, but that is correct. It's on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree that I think AI has its benefits. I also think there's a lot of really exciting things that it can do. For me, especially whenever, I'm limited in certain things, it's like, look, I could leverage it for this and create a picture in 2 minutes that has, every aspect that I was looking for in it. It would be one example at this point in time. So, yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast and for sharing with us about Sunrise Labs. I greatly appreciated our conversation, and wish you all the success in the future.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed very much the conversation. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.